what we're going to do is I'm going to kick off with a couple of questions, and then we're going to throw it into the floor and basically leave it to you to ask these lovely people any questions that you have. So first of all, I'm going to start with Sue to my left, and I'll make it easy.
Yes.
Could you just share with us a little bit about your career journey and sort of where you started and where you got to and what you're doing now?
Oh, cool. Thank you. Ngā kia koutou. Thank you, Mair. Thank you, KPMG and Amber, for making this event happen tonight. It's wonderful that you all came out on a sunny, almost Thursday. So I'm the imposter because I do not work in infrastructure, but I do govern in infrastructure adjacent, which is large-scale community and social housing projects in Tāmaki Makaurau. So sometimes we even have to build horizontal infrastructure like roads and pipes and things, and then we do houses on top. So that's kind of how I got a little bit interested. And there are very few women that we see on site when we're doing that work. But I've had 3 careers, and I think there's a question about what did you do, but I'll kind of weave that in because who cares about my career because I don't work in infrastructure. It was really about how do you transition between very, very different sectors effectively and take the core capabilities that you've developed and competencies and then take them across into a new domain. So I started as a teacher and academic and very interested in equity and educational provision, and then I moved across into business and became a chief executive. Hot tip for the night, what's the best way easiest and quickest way to become a chief executive? Start your own company and call yourself the chief executive. That worked well. And from then on, guess what? You're a chief executive. It was a great little company that we had going. A business partner and I sold out after 8 years. And then I've now made the transition into governance. And I know a lot of women that I work with, the key question is, how do I get into governance? Not that easily, actually. But that was another good move. So that's probably enough to say about my background. Thanks, Cheryl.
That's great, thank you, Sue. What about you, Corrina?
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko tainui te waka, ko Ngāti Maru te iwi, ko moihau te maunga, ko waihau te awa, ko Corrina Gibbons-Hurinui aho. So that's something I've been practicing because we've got deadline for our team day coming up in a month, so keep practicing doing that. So I'm an engineer. I studied civil engineering quite a long time ago now. And when I came out of engineering, I went straight into being a contractor. I was a big believer in you actually needed to know how to build the things that you were going to design later on and how everything worked. And that's can be pretty tough going into that as a female grad. Particularly 20 years ago, there weren't very many women on site, and so you had to be quite tough to get through that. I'd always been, sort of quite tomboyish, so I actually quite enjoyed it, and I still enjoy going out and kicking dirt and kicking contractors. So one of my favourite things actually that I enjoy. So I did that. That was quite long hours, and wanted to, I've done 4 or 5 years on site, and thought that maybe I'd give this consulting, a try and do some design. So I went to a design consultant who said, actually, you're the only person in our team that's actually been on site, so you can do all of our MSQA. And I found that quite a few of our designs were designed in 2D, like on a flat page looking at Google Maps. And when you got out on site, surprisingly enough, it wasn't flat. Which meant a lot of on-the-fly design for me and a lot of sort of, trying to defend why the guys in the office had done it the way that they had. And so I moved through that, started, working through an alliance project actually in maintenance and trying to get my design guys to come out on site and actually look at what we were doing so that they could give us better designs. Through to the end of that process, I had some friends who were project managers. And they said to me, you do pretty much what we do, but we get paid way more than you do. So I'm like, well, can I come and do what you do? Yeah, that's fine, come and do that. So I went to do that, and on my second day as a project manager, brand new project manager, trying to impress my new boss, I found out I was pregnant. with my first child. It took me a while to figure out what caused that because I proceeded to have three more after that one in quick succession. So I ended up with four boys, 3 under, and so took quite a long 2 years maternity leave there until I had 4 under 5. So once my eldest started at school, I went back into work and worked part-time as a client-side PM, and sort of worked my way up to full-time, and was doing that through COVID. We were working on the downtown project. It was really busy. Everyone of us was sitting at home doing nothing, and we were, carrying the business. Got to a point at my old company where I was kind of like, well, you want me to do all of this chargeable work, and you want me to run, manage people and do BD, and you're not giving me enough time. And I really felt that I wasn't able to work in a company that was looking after people really well. And for me, that was something over the years that is really important to me. And so I've shifted companies, and now, although not currently, because I'm quite busy on chargeable projects, but generally we do have enough time to manage our people and do the BD, and it's accepted that forms part of your 40 hours. It doesn't have to be on top. And that was one of the really good things about career camp for me, was that stuff that you need to think about, right? And often you think, oh, I'll do that on the weekend, or I'll go away and have, do a little retreat on my own and think about it. But actually, it benefits your company as well. So doing it in work time is actually, you've set the time aside, and you can sit down and do it, and you can get all of that input from other people. So for me, that was the big benefit of the career camp.
Nice. Cool. Mike?
Great.
Completely different again?
Completely different. Yeah. So I come from Welsh. So I moved here. Let me think about that. So I originally started as a project engineer, stumbled into project engineering. I worked in a little factory in my little village in Wales, and I made paper clips and staplers. By the end of the summer as a student, I was running quality control of the factory, and then I turned out it was a Fortune 50 company. So it was the biggest office product manufacturer in the world. Ended up in an internship graduate program, became a project engineer, only female in the engineering team without an engineering degree. So fake it till you make it, that's probably my big thing of everything.
The only female without an engineering degree, or the only female?
The only female and the only person without an engineering degree, so the two pieces. Did that, was across Europe for a number of years, which was great, looking after 14 factories. And then I was a bit tired of that. I was quite young, I was living in London, having a good time, and it was getting pretty intense and serious, so I thought I'd do a different change in career, so I joined EY as an external auditor, which is quite a big career change. Yeah, but they were looking for process consultants, so I went, I think I can do that. Joined that, that's the only one job I've ever applied for in my whole career. Did that as external audit, had to learn how to be an accountant, an auditor, and then during that time Enron happened, and we set up a new consulting business, and I worked with the global chairman to set up the consulting business, the global consulting business in London and around the world. And I was just a manager going, let's go, why not? Didn't know anymore. Ended up then moving to New Zealand in about 2008. Did my first infrastructure project in the UK, which was London Underground. Run the supply chain of London Underground, and we were talking about it earlier, they said, what do you know about infrastructure? Because I'd worked in corporates and pharmaceuticals and defence, and I said, I catch a train. And I did that for 9 months, and that was fun. And then moved to New Zealand, did 2 years here. And we originally came here to have a family. That wasn't really working out for us, so I put my career back on track, and I went over to Australia with EY and did 10 years over there. Helped run, provided assurance to the Cabinet and Queensland Government for the Commonwealth Games, run flood recovery programs for the state, wrote an infrastructure plan for the state, did that sort of stuff. So it all sort of came together, all the different skills I had. And then my husband wanted to come back to New Zealand, so I think I'm going to find a job. So then I started to have a conversation with KPMG whether there would change, and I moved over here to set up an infrastructure team and consulted. So I've been doing that for the last 4 years. Don't recommend moving country, set up a business just before you hit a pandemic. So that was it. But luckily I worked for Tony Blair in the UK doing a pandemic plan for the UK. So I actually was one of the people that knew what was probably going to happen. So I spent 6 months 10 years earlier writing a pandemic plan for the country, and a lot of it happened. So it's quite useful. So you just got serendipity, and I'm like, I live on Waiheke, I'm at the bottom of the world, in the best place in the world with a pandemic is in the world. So I joined a new company at the same time going, oh, I wonder what these people are going to be like. But here I am. Bit of an arch.
There you are. Yeah. Well, there's a lot to unpack in all of that. I'm interested, Corrina, you talked about starting in the engineering sector 20 years ago and saying that it was, there were a lot less women. One of the things that a lot of people at WIN say, and part of the reason that WIN was set up, is because there's a lot of people that feel isolated and alone and don't know each other. And that's only like in the last, so I think the infrastructure, the Women's Infrastructure Network was set up in 2016. So, and you're talking quite some time before that. So, and obviously there's a lot more women in engineering now than possibly there were then, but what sort of barriers do you think you faced during that time? And or maybe just pick one, because there might be more than one. But what sort of barriers did you face, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so I think one of the really key things about females that go into engineering is that if you're a female and studying engineering, you had to actually want to do that, you had to choose it. Quite often, you'll find if you went to engineering school, no doubt you knew many of these guys that went to engineering school because their dad was an engineer, or their uncle, or their granddad. They didn't really know what to do, so they just chose engineering. Whereas for a female, it's not something that you just choose. You have to actually, you like science and maths and all that stuff. And you have to really think about it. And so, like I know my class of, I think we had 110 people in my graduating class. There were probably 12 females in civil engineering. And those 12 females would have been in the top 30 of the class, because they were all people that actually wanted to be there and paid attention. Out of those 12, I think there's probably maybe 4 or 5 of us that still work in an engineering-related job now, so that's 20 years later. And a lot of those are, they're due to having, stop when you have a baby, and then sort of getting a bit left behind, and then it can be quite hard to get back out. So I think for me that's probably the biggest barrier, and it is something that we talked about at career camp actually, like when's the best time? And there's not really a best time, and kids will tell you that, will show you that once you've got them over and over again. There's never a best time for kids. They just do what they do when they do it. And I think the good thing now is, and I was really lucky that the people that I worked with at the time really liked me, so both times that I was on maternity leave, people were like, can you please come back early? So I was in demand at that particular point in time. And then when I came, the last time, it was actually, the guy said to me, I really like having working mums, because they're much more efficient. They come to work, they've got shit to do, and they know that they've got shit to do at home, so they just come to work, do work, and they go off and do whatever. And that is great that he saw that as being a good thing, but I also think that was never recognised as something that he should maybe pay a little bit extra for. Then guys that just sort of stand around in the office for 3 hours a day, just shooting the breeze and chilling out. So yeah, that would be my one.
Just out of interest, how many engineers do we have here? Okay, and how many people, how many women were there in your graduating classes? Just one.
Did you do electrical engineering?
Mechanical.
Oh, yeah.
Class of 87.
Wow.
So even like 35 years.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. What about anybody else? 10? Yeah.
I did industrial engineering, so more kind of production, like kind of chemical related, so it was a bit more half and half actually.
Right, yeah.
Much smaller classes though.
I graduated in 2020 and half my class were women.
Right. Sorry?
I graduated in 2017 and it was about 20% women.
Right. Interesting. That's good. We like that. Yeah. So Mair, over to you. In terms of your career, can you think of a particular barrier that you had?
Doesn't sound like it.
Being
To be really honest, being Welsh and working in London was actually quite stereotypical. I was suggested to have vocal coaching, various things.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was quite interesting. You know, when you're coming up and you're trying to, you probably got a chip in your shoulder from where you come from and where you are, and you're just trying to fight through it, and it didn't really help.
Yeah.
But that was probably the biggest one. And then, but what was my serendipity is when I actually made partner the person who I did my interview with in an Asia Pacific role, and we just chatted, and it turned out he used to go on holidays from London to my village in Wales, and he knew exactly where I lived.
Yeah.
And I thought about how serendipitous of something that I was told to maybe enhance, change, modify was actually probably the thing that got me to that huge milestone moment.
Yeah.
And I just said, well, you know how hard I have worked to get here. Let's finish the conversation now, shall we? And just we had a chat after that, and it was really good.
Yeah.
But that was probably the one thing. Actually, I didn't see it as much of a gender stuff. I was actually my socioeconomic background.
Right. That's interesting. And so, how did you? I find that quite shocking.
It's a class. Britain's different from a class society. It's very different.
Yeah.
Amber and I not in there yet. It's like, it's different. It's different.
Yeah,
it's hard to appreciate sometimes if you've not been there's classes.
Yes. Yeah. And so, what did you do though? Like when you had that. Let's just take the example of when you were told maybe you should have vocal lessons. What did you say to that person?
I just thanked them for the feedback.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Feedback's a gift. You choose whether you accept it or what you do with it.
Yeah.
So it was a perspective. Maybe I wasn't as clear on my communication, so I need to think maybe about how I communicated, but that was my integrity and my authenticity.
Yes.
And I knew that even then, I'd already come across a lot of battles already, and so I was like, yeah, that's good to know, thank you, but I'll choose how I use that feedback.
Yes.
But, it could have really knocked me, you know what I mean?
Yes.
It was how I choose to use that feedback. So I would say feedback's a gift. You decide whether you take it or not.
Yes, well that's an excellent lesson. Yeah. So Sue, how about you?
I was just thinking, Corrina, when you said that your boss said I really like working mums because you're so efficient, and I was one of those as well as a single parent. But I think we will be there when we have managers, male or female, say, I really like working with dads. They're great, they're very efficient. They like to get to work early and get it done, and they like to get home in time to get the kids from school and get dinner on, and they're so efficient to work with. That will be the day, right? That will be the day. I think the thing for me, Sharon, is it's really cultural. It can be cultural in a different way that you're, cultural with a big C, right? But I still feel as a woman in a lot of the contexts where I find myself that I'm kind of faced with a choice. I either, and I call it transmogrify, I either sort of at worst transmogrify, adapt something in order to fit into what is a dominant culture. And I know that, for instance, Māori, I know who identifies Māori, that's a whole other level. So I'm saying that as a middle-class Pākehā woman in Aotearoa, but I'm still in rooms where I can do it, I can play it, but I don't really want to have to anymore. And I see those dominant cultures as they create insiders and outsiders, and I think they actually do that for men as well. And for instance, I was just saying I was on the ferry coming from Waiheke, which is where I met Mair. Not today, but previously. And there was a group of guys who looked like they might have been in the construction industry, and it looks like they had their Christmas lunch. And one of them said to the other, "Oh mate, I turned gay for you." And I thought, wow, there it is. You know, there it is still. And these will be leaders, because I'm talking about the wealthy people who, you know, men, look like men in their 60s. And I'm sure if I met them professionally, they'd tell me that they're totally on board with diversity and inclusion. And they probably maybe even want to be genuinely. But behind the curtain after a few drinks, and I just almost wanted to call out, there it is. There it is. There's what you really think. And I think these things, and this is unconscious bias as how we experience, but actually behind it, in many cases, can be very conscious bias. I think it's real. What the research shows in New Zealand, hands down, is 80% of the difference in the gender pay gap cannot be explained by qualifications or the actual economic value add to a company. And the only way economists can get their heads around the other 80% is to say it's bias, whether conscious or unconscious, and it is real. You know, unfortunately, you know, I'm coming here at the end of my career. I've experienced my whole life and my working with younger women, and I was chatting to a few of you beforehand. Sadly, it's still there, right? And it comes out in a whole range of ways.
But I like to play the other bias now. When I came to New Zealand, it was quite pretty daunting, you know, coming with the pandemic and all that. And I think I met one senior woman in infrastructure, and then I met a whole crew. And they've been so supportive in helping me come in the market, and we've seen more and more women come in, and there's this whole network that is really helping each other connect people. If they're not invited to something, then somebody else extends the invite, and it's been really positive for women. Women in senior infrastructure, it's been awesome.
Yeah.
And I think we just got ourselves to celebrate sometimes that, but you know, the flip. And I was talking to somebody, and they said, "Oh, you women are all going out." And I said, "Well, you've had 150 years of it, and I'm getting used to it." And it's a little bit like that. It's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but it was a bit being explicit to go, actually, this is my lever. I'm going to use that lever because it's going to help accelerate me understand the market, network, understand what's going on, understand the dynamics and the culture. But so, you know, I was just like, use the bias sometimes to actually help you, if you know what I mean. I'm much more probably an optimist of, you know, that sort of, and then, yeah, they've been awesome, and then I've seen they've just helped so many women come into the market from, you know, in New Zealand, but also external, and just saying, hey, how do we help you? How do we look after you? Come in.
And that would be my experience coming into the infrastructure network as well. Adrian Miller actually said, I am a relentless promoter of women, and I thought that is a great one-liner, and she does that, but so does everybody else. Everybody on this panel does it for each other. You know, Sue and I talk at least once a while. There was a time when I lost. I have a pandemic. Everybody has a pandemic story as well, but I lost my job during the pandemic. I was employed as a country leader for a multinational consultancy firm who decided to leave New Zealand in the middle of the pandemic. Just got a phone call out of the blue and said, "Oh, we're shutting down the office. Can you please make your team redundant, and then we'll make you redundant." And that was an entire process, and I'm very flippant about it now, but I possibly wasn't quite so flippant at the time. But I hadn't spoken to Sue for probably about 6 months, and she just rang me. Got an email, a bounce back email saying, "Sharon no longer works there." She's like, rang me and said, "What the hell?" But she didn't have any agenda or anything. She just, you know, picked up the phone and said what's going on. And I wouldn't have met her without the Women's Infrastructure Network and getting involved in infrastructure and getting involved in that group of women. And so, yeah, I think it's the relentless promotion of women and keeping the ladder down to help everybody else up. You know, needing somebody. Do you know anyone in the such and such? Oh yeah, well I'll put you in touch with so and so and those sorts of things. I think it's really important. So We heard quite a lot already, but I'm just going to throw it open to the audience and say, does anybody have a particular question as a result of any of that discussion? Don't be shy.
Or an observation.
Or an observation.
From your experience.
I think maybe something that we haven't covered that much, maybe briefly, was about, thank you.
Thank you so much for the discussions. That's very good. My name is Christina, and I just wanted to know a bit more about your work-life balance. Maybe it wasn't covered slightly in terms of like how your career progresses, but also understanding how do you actually make a call and still have a successful career. To any extent. Thank you.
Have Amber help you, that's what I have. She tells me off, tells me where I should be. Boundaries, being prepared to understand what your boundaries are. So in my sort of early 20s, partied hard in London, had a great time, worked really hard. I had my daughter when I was 37. I was still working pretty hard, and I knew I had something to change. I finished work I was doing a government transformation program and that until 39 weeks of pregnancy. So I was like, oh, let's slow down here. So when I came back to work after having 6 months off full time, I was like, okay, I'm not going to try and work weekends. And I used to say to my team, if I work a weekend, that's your poor planning, and I'm not going to do it. And it's, pretty much he's 10 now. I've probably worked like maybe a handful of weekends in that whole time. So that was me going on, Monday to Friday I'm pretty intense, and this is our type of nature, our job, not only engagements and technical delivery, but socialising, entertaining, all that sort of stuff. But weekends I'm really like, I am present. My husband tells me off sometimes because I'm like trying to do too much on the weekend with her. But that was my trade-off of boundaries. I go in, Monday to Friday, but then the emails are off. There's no emails on the weekend. Maybe Monday morning on the ferry, I start the emails again. And just reality of, I'm not a break surgeon. I'm not saving lives. I'm in a consulting business. So you've got to get perspective. And I find that time off is actually better for me. I don't worry about as much. And I have a bit of perspective, whereas I think if you just keep going, sometimes it's harder. So that's my perspective, boundaries. And you control your boundaries, not your boss. So it's what we give around that, comment.
Hi, my name is Rishina Miraj from Stantec. Apart from the leadership camp, is there anything or plans in place to see drastic change for empowering women in New Zealand, especially in the engineering industry?
What would you like to see?
Yes.
What I would like to see.
Yeah. What would help you?
Like I said, I went to site last week and managing a project, but everybody around me were all males, and I would have liked to see at least 2 women there, part of their team, but they were all males. So I want to see change, and I just want to know if there's any governance or any plans in place to see that change or make that change, or we can be part of that change.
So I guess I can talk about what we're trying to do in terms of WIN. So there's the network, obviously, the Women's Infrastructure Network. We're trying to bring people together, give them, I always say it's not rocket science. The clue is in the name. It's the Women's Infrastructure Network. Pretty straightforward in terms of what we're trying to do. What we are doing, which we're starting to develop a pipeline, but it's only a start. So this year we arranged the Girls in Infrastructure event, which was out in South Auckland, which I think some people here were involved with, Lisa, and I think I saw somebody else. Yeah, there she is. And so that involved 16, 18-year-old, year 12 and 13 girls from the high schools in South Auckland coming to a site where we ran field trips we had people from the network, women from the network, in charge of those groups, giving them opportunities to learn about infrastructure. We also had a sort of mini careers expo place where the universities were present. We had a speaker who was a senior engineer at Auckland Airport talk about her career. We're doing that again this year. So for the last 3 or 4 years, that's been run in Northland. This year we ran it in Auckland. Next year we're running it in Northland, Auckland and Hamilton, and we're working that out across the country. We've also got Career Camp going finally, which is and the Girls in Infrastructure is now being taken over by Infrastructure New Zealand. So that was being run by Fulton Hogan, who found it, I think, probably a little too challenging in terms of having to do their day job as well, and then run that event. So Infrastructure New Zealand has taken that over, and we've got plans to take that nationally. And then we've got Career Camp, which we're also started in Auckland this year, and we're hoping to build nationally. And then we've also started this year a program for our senior women about progress in governance. So we ran one event this year where we had a number of people that were chairs of boards that, or chairs on boards that came along and spoke in a group like this, in a group setting, about how you move forward into a governance role, or into governance roles. So for me, that I see that as being sort of the young cohort, the medium cohort, and the leadership cohort. But obviously, there is far more that we could be doing. We still get the kind of feedback that you've given, where you go on site with a group of 20 people, and there's 2 women, and in some cases they're treated badly, or there's I've heard stories about there not being a toilet on a roading project, and so the stop code person, who happens to be a woman, who is not, by law, isn't allowed to leave their post, can't go to the bathroom. And how is it 2023 and these things are still happening? So, so one of the things that I'm also very interested in, which we talk a lot, and the programs that we sort of got underway, about what women can do and what I want to do next, which we've got a meeting with the Chief Executive of Infrastructure New Zealand in a couple of weeks. What I want to do next is to be setting up a program of talking to the businesses that make up the Infrastructure Network about what they can be doing to improve the environment for women, and also the retention of women. And one of the things, I think one of the positive things that I see in that space is that there are a lot of men around who don't quite know what to do. They know that this is a problem and they want to help solve it, but they're not quite sure how to do that. And so I think that's the next focus for me, as well as ensuring that all of the things that we've already done remain embedded. The next step is then to get into that space with those senior leaders on the other side, as it were, to move that conversation forward. Because I think there is a lot that can be done, and you can look at, obviously, Corrina, your organisation is a lot more forward-thinking than some, and there are organisations out there, Line Breweries has fixed their pay gap, so it can be done. And those are the two very...
And it's peer pressure, so we do like from KPMG, we have our chair, Matt Pritchard, is on for Global Women Champions Change.
Yeah.
And it's going wider than gender, it's wider from diversity, accessibility, ethnicity, and that is like literally all the top companies in New Zealand. You might not even know that it happens, and they basically are CEOs of them calling each other on, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you helping? What are you, what you're challenging with? And So that sort of, there's some stuff like that. And I think the other piece is just what we can do, if I call it that. I was with a CEO of a firm, and he was working through what it was, and I said, would your daughter join you? I said, what would your daughter do? Because they struggle, and they go, what's wrong? Why aren't they in the room? What they is, and you know what I mean? And they grapple, and I go, would your daughter want to work for you? Would your daughter want to be in the daughter? Yeah, you know what I mean? And it's us trying to do that sort of conversations as well as leaders, going, actually, how do we help everybody by going, actually, yeah, it's a little bit uncomfortable in those conversations, but that's part of what we need to do. But I also think there's a whole piece now of, you were just talking about it from an academic perspective, you're seeing different participation rates at university in engineering degrees. You're starting to see that sort of swell come in, and now it's about how do we transition from that university high attention, high levels of participation to that transition in. So we've been doing a thing called RoboGals with the University of Auckland to go, okay, let's do a hackathon, and we did a transport project, and people didn't know what we were going to be doing. We just had 40 or 50 people in, said let's just do a few hours, let's get exposure to a transport strategy problem. And that's the sort of stuff we can all do as organisations, and I also think you just can all get involved. You can do it in all your organisations. So you don't have to wait for leadership sometimes to do it, you just go, can we have an emerging leaders board? What's your diversity program? Are we signing up to Crayon and the gender gap? What are we doing? Yeah, So there's other things we can sort of start doing a little bit in agitation.
Yeah. So in terms of what you guys can do, I think it's ask questions, and they're reasonable questions to ask. And if you get pushback, then find some friends. and talk about the answers and question. I think you can do it in a polite way, and it's nerve-wracking for everybody. We still, I'm sure everybody on stage can tell you of a situation where you've had to ask difficult questions. It doesn't get easier; you just get better at it. And you ask your friends, and you ask, am I being unreasonable here? Is this, and you figure it out.
And I think the other angle I was trying to work through is a competition and productivity angle. That's the other way to do it.
Yeah.
So we put in place a whānau policy for paid parental leave. So I came here and I was just like KPMG, and I was like, wow, I wouldn't have been able to be a director and had a baby because I was the main earner, and you're not going to pay me hardly anything for. You would have lost me. So I was like, how many people are we losing at the door? Men and women for this. And how do we make it a competitive advantage? So we launched a whānau policy of paid leave, a significant paid leave, and we benchmarked across different industries. And we said, let's go. And then, it's like a little bit of a competitive environment, you know what I mean? And the engineering firms are doing more, the corporates are doing more, and it's like, that's what we can all do. But if you're just going to lose all this talent you invest in and walk out the door, why would you do that? You know what I mean? So that's the sort of stuff that we can also sort of do more of and get visibility of. And I think that's what Crayon is doing. I think Crayon is doing is publishing all the parental leave. So we do men and women because we actually what's a choice and what does that look like? And if you've got two people within the organisation, it's pretty productive. We've got some people. But we had more men actually take up that policy than women, I think, in the first year. Yeah, because it was a certain age and they could do it and they could kick into it in different areas. But there's other, that's just if you choose to have children. There's also we need wider benefits for all different scenarios. I think that's what we're learning to do more of. But that was 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. So I was quite surprised when I came here and I thought, wow, this is all this.
So just picking up on that point, because what I find, so I've been running some workshops this year with one of the big infrastructure companies in New Zealand with their women, and women at your level, and a lot of women don't know what the diversity, equity and inclusion policies are in their company, and one of the companies was actually owned by a European company, which has some very strong ESG, and most of you will know ESG, so it's environment, social, government, and the social bit is things like pay equity, gender equity, diversity, equity and inclusion, fair labour practice, etc. So if you're in a company that's owned by a European or American company, for example, they will have some very clear requirements, and I see some of you nodding. My simple hack is make it your business to find out what they are, and you'll start to see them often reported through in reports to shareholders, in annual reports, in your strategy. It's probably in your strategy. You've got a people strategy, which will be part of KPMG, but make it your business to find that out because it's publicly available information. And often when I'm working with a company, I just Google. Like Mair had said that, oh, can you come do some work at KPMG? And I will. I first just find what's in the public domain. What does KPMG say? And people like Matt making some very strong statements publicly about the commitment to what we call DEI. Some of you aren't familiar with that acronym, diversity, equity and inclusion. And often some of that policy infrastructure is in place. The gap is how it sort of plays out in practice. But if you don't know what the policy is, you're really on the back foot in terms of saying, hey, can we look at this issue around facilities that enable women to be on site, for example, or another infrastructure company I went to had free period products for women in their bathroom. I mean, there's simple things that say you belong here, and anyone's company do that? It's starting to happen in the sector. I mean, there's small things, but it says you belong here. I was wondering what you've experienced, Corrina. We kind of lost the original question, haven't we?
Yeah, that's okay. That's the whole point.
Such a good answer to that as well. Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking back, like when I was graduating, I first job and I'm like looking around, there weren't people like us. So there was like no one that I was like, oh yeah, cool, I want to be like her when I grow up. And I think now that I'm grown up, maybe people want to be like me, and that's how we get there. Like you're on site, and then next thing you know, there will be some little grab toiling around in the soil, kicking dirt, and she'll see you and she'll be like, I want to be like that when I grow up, and then and it just carries on like that. So I think more people come, more people stay, and more stay, and then that's just it takes a long time.
But also it's tough, so how do you have your support network? So isn't it what they say is have your personal advisory board? Who's your personal advisory board around you? Who's your friends? Who's your colleagues? What does that look like? How you build that up? And you build that up from a grad or from university. Don't think you have to get to a certain level to do that. You build it up early. Build it up early in the support and keep it wide, keep it broad, and then you get different perspectives, and then you sort of realise everybody's going through something. I think everybody's going through something. Sometimes we think it's just us, and then you start getting that network and you start realising everybody's going through different things, and you can help them for other things.
Just on the grad thing, one thing I wanted to say, so when I first started out, I was working for a company called Eco Products, which is now part of Fonterra, and I used to carpool with the site accountant at the site that I worked with, and her boyfriend was the site accountant. No, she was the revenue accountant. He was the site accountant at another site down the road. He's now the CFO at Fonterra. So I was at the wedding, but that's a relationship that started 30 years ago with the people that I carpool to work with.
She's the CEO.
Sorry? She's the CEO. Yeah, no, she's not the CEO, but he's not quite the CFO, but his job title's this long, and we never see him because he's very busy. But the point is that the people, to Maya's point, your network starts when you're at university and at school. Those people that you know, the people that you get on with, you'll continue to know. Some of them will fall away, but you don't have to wait until you're of a certain age to get to know people. Just talk to the people next to you. You're at a women's infrastructure network. Again, talk to someone. You'll have something in common. You're both engineers. You're both women. You might both have kids. You might not have kids.
And be intentional about your networking events.
Yeah.
So set yourself a goal, and that sounds weird, but set yourself a goal. When you go to a networking event, it's pretty daunting. You're going, I don't know anybody, I don't know what, I'll just sit in the corner and eat the nibbles and you know, you've made the effort to come here, so think about, you know, set yourself a goal. I'm going to meet 3 new people, and I'm going to get their emails and contacts, and I'm going to have a coffee meeting with them afterwards.
Yeah.
Like, let's set little goals. It doesn't have to be big, daunting goals. You know, you set little goals of,
And if
you're here, how do you
and
make it count?
And if that is terrifying, if you think, oh my God, 3 people, are you sure? Jeez, start with 1.
Yeah.
Talk to 1 person, okay? And at the next event, talk to 2 people. And at the event after that, talk to 2 people and organise to have coffee with 1 of them. You know, and then, yeah, just build. Yes.
I have a 2-part question. So part 1 is, so you all have quite diverse backgrounds and you've dealt with this industry that, as one of you has mentioned, that it is quite a male-dominated industry, we all know that. But how do you maintain that authenticity within yourself? Because sometimes we might find ourselves, I don't know about you guys, but I work full-time, and there's certain times when I've had to sort of try and be like, oh, let me think like a man, but that's not the way to go. But like, how do you maintain that authenticity within yourself and in the hopes of becoming an authentic female leader, so that the next time when you're leading younger people, like you say, people, grads coming and kicking dirt, then you're not teaching them to become like the men that are around them, but more becoming themselves. But also, the second part of my question is, how do you then navigate your career? Like, what's the best way to design it such that you, so for example, most people are thinking of having babies, for example, but then sometimes that could mean people will be forced to take career breaks out of that. And when you're trying to come back, then there'll be expectations or the impulses in them that you're too behind or something. But how can you design it such that you're still working with it? Some people still believe in, you know, the whole why engineers, building our communities around us. And yeah, so what are the tools, or how can you design that career so that when you, whatever stage in life that you are as a female, whether it's raising a family or etc., you're still an authentic engineer and you're working within the career within this industry, so that we retain the 20% of females who graduated within the industry.
I can have a go at that one.
Yeah.
I think this is actually, I'm going to tell you to actually be more like a man, to be authentic. I think, I look around and I see lots of guys that are just, the way I would put it is to be unapologetically themselves. They just don't really care. And that's what you need to do. You need to be unapologetically yourself. And I think often, I often, I'm like, oh, God, I can't do that. You know, for them. And, you know, now that I'm a bit older and sort of got grey hair, you know, it's not life or death. You know, if they think that I'm a dork or whatever, then that's on them. It's, you know, and I think I think, to be honest, the fact that you can recognise that you're doing it, right, and then you just don't do what you think that you should do. So often, I think when I was probably coming through, to be honest, I probably wasn't quite like that. I got a lot of feedback from career campers around being blunt and straight up. So that is how I am. But often you can just do it without realising. You do little things to fit in. And it's so that if you do that without realising, you can't change it. So the fact that you're recognising it, and the fact that you can potentially recognise it in others and say, hey, look, you don't have to be like that. You know, either by just you being yourself, or by telling them you don't need to be like that. That's how you do it. You just have to hold on to, I'm okay, just the way I am.
There's also things, I know there's a few camps on, the Lean In book. You know, sometimes people go, well, you sacrifice some things. There's, there was always once it came out, it was really good, and then everyone, you're compromising what you're doing. And there's also some things that sometimes you've got to be authentic, but you've got to be careful with your authenticity. And this is an example of me. I was a waitress, right? I love serving people. I'm very homely. I like looking after people. So I'll be the person that will pour the coffee in a meeting room and all this. And when I was sort of like in that mid-career, sort of like in that early 30s, somebody said to me, don't the cling film, which is the UK term for the glad wrap, off the sandwiches. And don't pour.
It's not your job.
It's not my job. Whereas for me, it was my natural, authentic self. And if you see me now, or most people see me in my rooms, and I'm like, come on, everybody, make sure you're okay, and let's look. I had to stop that for a little while because it was impacting what I was there for that room for. Do you know what I mean? And so there's sometimes the authenticity of knowing what it is, but sometimes you just play it down a little bit. And it's only for points in time. But that's like a really example, but it was like an example of going, I'd always go, do you go coffee, okay? Can I make sure? And like now I do it, now I rock it again. But it was at one stage there was a little bit of, let me modify that down. That's how I work. My mum would be very proud that I was like that. And so I'm like, okay, just maybe not for a little while. When I'm in certain meetings, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that comes back to
just an example,
Corrina's point, I think, about being self-aware.
Yes.
And realising that at that particular juncture in time, it is not appropriate.
Yes.
Or it's not going to serve me in my career
At this point in
time. But yeah, and I would agree with Corrina's. I was struggling with how to answer the first part of your question, but I think that is it. Is that you've got to hold on to who you are, and have the confidence to be yourself. And it may be that some people don't like that, and that's okay. It's okay that if not everybody likes you. That would be my comment on that. The other thing, the second part of your question, navigating. I had to smile internally when you talked about designing your career. I don't think I could say that I have designed my career. I started doing the things that I liked doing. I didn't know what to do at university, so I started with what I liked doing, which was geography and environmental science. And in a time when environmental science didn't actually quite exist yet in New Zealand. And then I just kept doing the things that I liked doing, and opportunities arose. I was a bit like Mair, and I did apply for jobs, but things just happened, and I think I had my eyes open for opportunities, and so the next thing always happened. When it came to having children, I really, really struggled. Because I'm an A-type, career-driven. I don't think of myself as being competitive, but I'm told that I am. Corrina talks about feedback. Yeah, so I think that the thing that I hung on to when I was having kids was scale it up, scale it down, but never stop working. And so, and that's not actually true, because I did stop working a couple of times, but I kind of always kept my hand in, and so I took career breaks when the kids were little, and then they go through that sickness stage where they're sick forever. It feels like years, and I got to a point in that where I said, I just can't do this anymore, so I quit. It was one of those, not quite a rage quit situation, but I was like, that's it, I've had enough, I'm not doing it anymore. 6 months later, I was back because I was bored. But yeah, I think boundaries are important, and then scale it up and scale it down. So if you've only got 2 days a week, then only work 2 days a week. And I think the other thing that someone said to me once was, see it as an investment in your, like, in the now. You're like, oh my God, I'm only working 2 days a week. I'm going to miss out on that project, or I'm going to miss out on this, or I'm not going to be able to do this, or whatever. But it's an investment in your future. It's not about what you're doing today. It's about what you're going to be able to do in 5 years' time, or what you're going to be able to do in 10 years' time. And you take a hit financially, but it's a hit for now. It's not a hit for You know,
And it's 40 years, like potentially you could be working for 40 years.
yeah,
Like, I'm not so scary, but you go in, what's a few years in 40 years?
Yeah.
That's the other perspective you need. I know it doesn't feel like that at the time, and you
No.
have a perfect plan, but
yeah.
that's the,
So I'm not sure whether we've answered your question. I don't know if anybody
I would
else
say
has-
the other thing I heard was say, just say yes to the opportunities.
Yeah.
Honestly, I had no plan. Honestly, like I remember we were in university and my girlfriends were around the table and we thought we'd write a little, obviously probably maybe drinking a bit too much and drink these envelopes and what we thought we were going to earn by the time we were 30, we just put random numbers down like this. That was like within a year of leaving university. We had no clue, we had no view, you know. And I mean, well, that's not about money and stuff, but we just didn't know what our potential was. So by saying yes to the opportunities was like, oh, okay, you know, you want me to do this, really? Or you want me to sit on this meeting? And, you know, and that was what I found, was just saying yes to the opportunities, work it out later. You know, and there's never a plan. Like I thought I had a project plan, if you know what I mean. I was moving to New Zealand, I wanted to have a baby, all this sort of perfect plan. Then I found that I couldn't have children, and I needed IVF, and I had to go 5-6 years of IVF. Do you know what I mean? It was just like my plan wasn't my plan. You know what I mean? And I just kept on going. If you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was tough and stuff like that. I was like, okay, this is my plan. Just keep going. Just explore. Just have fun. Some things will happen. You know. You know. But you know what I mean? So there was like a bit of a curated plan that I thought I was going to have, and I was overthinking a little bit of it. And I was like, oh, just gotta let it go.
Yeah, you want to have like a beacon on the hill that you're aiming towards, right? But you can't go, okay, well, I'm going to go walk forward 200 metres and go leave 50, and you know, just sort of, like Mair says, you sort of take the opportunities, and you might go off on a tangent a bit, but you can't. Just keep rolling.
And 40, like you know, like I said, say perspective is hard. Like it's a bit easier now being here at this side of it, but honestly, it's a bit like my 30s. Yeah, you know, I just would I have ever said I was going to work in infrastructure? Would I ever said I was going to build a mine in Mongolia? No. Would I ever say I would, you know what I mean? I had no clue. And my dad laughs at me now and he's like, what do you know about any of this? Because he's a chemical engineer, and I'm like, I know what I know, but I know what I don't know. And I know how to ask questions, and I know how to be curious and be interested in people. It's done me okay. You know, and that was authentically me. I'm not trying to suddenly be the smartest person in the room going, oh, I think your equation's a bit wrong, or you're not sure about this. And I'm like, just ask, be interested. Be interested. For me, it's being interested, being curious, being a people person. And my job in what I do now is putting people together. My job is to be interested in somebody and knowing that they got a GIS background, and knowing that this was what they did 10 years ago in their career, and going, oh, I remember when, you know, Demi did this, and what did this look like, and something like this. And being interested is what actually is my super skill. And I work out what your superpowers are. You've all got them, you just got to work out where they are.
Yes.
Sorry. So Corrina, you kind of made a point before about you wouldn't want to become an engineer, needed to choose to be an engineer, and from personal experience it can kind of translate into a feeling of kind of like proving that you belong, and you know there's stats that women feel like they need to expected to meet all the requirements in order to apply for a job, or meet all the requirements to get a promotion. So question for any of you, kind of how do you deal with or have you experienced, or how do you deal with kind of having potentially different expectations of you as a woman, both from kind of other people that have an influence on your kind of assessment of your performance, but also kind of for yourself, and knowing the worth and then, expecting that from other people rather than feeling like you're a bit of an imposter?
Yeah, I think if I had not chosen the children one, I think the next biggest barrier that I found in my career has been myself. And it is a really difficult one. I mean, I know when I read that, the research for the came out, I'm like, oh yeah, what do you mean you can apply for jobs if you don't meet all of the things? So that doesn't seems illogical to me. It's smart. And it's something that, when we're doing hiring, it's something that we're quite aware of. And I know Jordan, prior to me starting, because like these ladies, I generally don't apply for jobs. So someone sort of taps me on the shoulder, or I go and say, hey, why don't you hire me? And normally they say yes. Strange reason. But there's particular wording that you can put into adverts that clicks better with a female brain in terms of how you word it. So that is something that we definitely take into account. I'm quite lucky. I've had lots of people sort of say, no, it's all right. You're not as bad as you think you are, and you're doing okay. And to be honest, my husband is one of those who's constantly saying you're better than you think you are. And I to be honest, I've been quite lucky in terms of that, and it is something that I'm very aware of, and making sure that when you're talking to other females that you're like, it's okay. And I think actually one of the things that used to strike me is I knew through the scholarship that I was involved in, I knew quite a few guys, different career paths, and just like, how are you getting where you're getting? You guys are numpties. Like, nice guys, and quite smart in a way. But I'm like way more smart than you. And then that once you can sort of realise, like, look what they're doing, like they're just like, oh yeah, I can do half those things. And you're like, well, I can do a third of those things, so I won't even bother. And I think it's just like looking around and knowing what you know about other people around you, benchmarking yourself that way.
The other point, and I know we're almost out of time, Sharon, but you were going to mention it, which is, are we out of time?
Well, does anyone else on you?
I'm here for the team here. Yes. I just want to get in a point about sponsors, and you've actually both mentioned it, because you both in passing said things like, then he said mostly, oh, why don't you do that? And you're like, oh, okay. And so I just want to talk about sponsorship, because there's a lovely piece of research, and I was just spotting it up before I came over. It's called Building Better, and it was a study of women in construction in the US. It was done this year. But they said the number one enabler for women's careers in the construction, which included infrastructure industry, is a sponsor. What is a sponsor? And that is what a lot of men have. The sponsors in your industry, most of those sponsors are going to end up being men. And I know we had this conversation over a glass of wine, Mair, and you said this a lot, that you had men who see you, and I've had this in my career. It wasn't in infrastructure. When I started as an academic, it's really important that the senior academics or professors see you, believe in you, and they will create opportunities for you. And the idea about a sponsor that I really love is the person who speaks for you when you are not in the room. And there's a lot of these promotions and escalators that happen that you don't even see. And that's why sometimes you turn around and go, how come sure he's doing that? I didn't even know that was happening. But because they had somebody in the room who said, oh, Sharon's really interested in airport runways, and suddenly you're getting asked to come in, and then your job is to say yes and thank you. So make it your business to identify somebody in your business, and for most of you it will be a man, because there aren't many women in senior leadership. If there's a woman, great, but it doesn't have to be. There are good men in your industry like there are in every industry. There's probably two good ones here. And so male allies and sponsors who see you, who are committed to diversity and inclusion genuinely, and I bet you can all think of who they are, but more importantly, have enough power in the organisation that they can open a door for you, make a pathway, and they really get you. And I had this when I didn't plan to get pregnant. I was doing my master's at the time. It's like, surprise! And I was running a big project, a research project, and the professor said, that's right, so you don't take the time you need, so we've got you. Whenever you're ready to come back, it's all here for you. Well, and he used to invite me to code all the papers with him. He said, you need to present at that conference, I'm going to help you do your abstract. And he'd use his name to validate that I was someone who could present at a conference, for example. He'd lend his professional brand to me. Why? Because he believed in me. Yeah. And you've had this, haven't you?
Yeah. Like, the proudest moment you have is also when you're doing that for others. So I had one really recently, so to give you a bit of an arc of the story, so she worked for me, she came out of deep engineering, she didn't back herself, she was really good, but she didn't really back herself, and she was a peer with her husband at the time, And I remember sitting down and she wasn't sure, and I said, you realise you can earn twice what your husband earns. You need to have a conversation about what goes on at home. You need to understand what you can do because you've got the potential. And then a few years later, she was struggling with some kids and she wasn't sure that she wanted to be the mum to make sure they were going to school. I said, you go and have a leave of absence over this next 2 months, over the December-January break, and we'll have a conversation at the end of January or early February. So she had a leave of absence, she did great mum, got her daughter into school, got settled, and she went, and I went and had a coffee with her, and she went, oh, can I come back? And I went, yeah, but you needed to do that. That's what you need to do. She's just hit a huge milestone in her career, and I saw her about a month ago when I went back to Australia, and it was like one of the proudest moments, because I was like, God, and we were talking about it, do you remember that coffee conversation? And she's like, yeah. And she just, you know, she's still absolutely authentically herself. I was looking at like a LinkedIn post of her just presenting, and she is exactly what she was like 10 years ago when I met her. And I just think that's the sort of stuff when you go in, actually you can see the changes quite quickly. It doesn't have to be really long in your career, but you just go in, you know, I wasn't a partner when I started with her, you know, working with her. I was just a little bit more senior and just going, come on, let's do this. What can we do? What a roller coaster we could go on. And it's, you know, it's the proudest thing you can do as a sponsor to go. And we didn't use the word sponsor at the time. It was just like, I'm just trying to help, you know. And it was awesome. And I know she is doing that for so many other women and so many other men as well, because she reciprocates. You reciprocate. When somebody does something really nice for you, you want to go, who can I help? So that's what I'm saying about all your networks. You can all do this. It doesn't have to be at a certain threshold point when you do these things.
Yeah. I have a question about knowing when to change jobs or when to leave one. How do you do it? Do you use your instinct? Do you write pros and cons lists? How do you figure out when it's time to go?
I'll say something about that.
Yeah.
It's
a good question.
I think it's really important, and I know we had a little bit of some people saying, I didn't know about where I was going in direction and travel, but I really think that it is important to have a sense of whatever a timeline of, whatever, like you said to that woman, do you realise you could earn twice? Okay, so you want to be on 400k a year, whatever your goals are. But I always say to women, don't leave where you are until you have absolutely exhausted all the opportunities. And quite often this has happened in career camp a few times, didn't it, Corrina, where women would go back in their performance review and say, hey, so just so you know, I want to be a senior manager within a year or whatever it was. Is that possible? They go, yeah, absolutely. But the manager didn't know that that's what she wanted. She'd never asked for it. So my biggest, you know, it is where in the business that you're in, is there an opportunity that if you can, you might not know where it is actually, but you're asking for what you want. And you're asking effectively for more. You're saying more, please. You know, I'm up for more responsibility, more challenge. I want to learn a different part of the business. I want to buy my own home in 2 years and I'm about 100k a year short of that in my income. What's my pathway to get me there? And you might get the answer back, there isn't one, at which point would you support me to take a role outside the company? That's a fair question, because good employers, and I bet you both embody this, and you would, when you were at your other shop, I know you did, good employers want to advocate for their good people and see them thriving and placed well. And if that's not in the company, because you haven't got the right opportunity, am I right on this?
Yeah. And it is that having that conversation before you leave and going, look, you know, this is what I was expecting, this is where I am, not sure about it, you know, and I'm not necessarily doing it myself like that, but I've been the recipient of people doing it going, oh, I didn't really realise you wanted that, or oh, let me see if I can make that happen, or you want to do an international transfer, let me make that happen, let me see if I can connect you to something. Do you know what I mean? And that's, you know what I mean? So it's like we have all this talk in our head, and we think everybody knows what's going on in our head. We've got to actually tell people what's going on in our head. And sometimes, you know, I'm an extrovert, therefore I would say, some people aren't writing in an email or reflect after that performance review, and you know when you've been sometimes kicked or you got sidelined by something or you got a little bit emotional and you're going, you know, these are all things that happen to us. Reflect on it, send an email following the next day and going, actually, this is how it felt, or this is, maybe I didn't get my point across, this is what I meant by this. This is, you know what I mean? Like, so there's other communication mediums rather than the one-to-one, you know, the verbal meeting conversation. There's other ways to get your points across if you're not sure, you know what I mean? It's just quite intimidating, because sometimes it's pretty intimidating, so it's been easier to send an email.
Yeah, but it's also, I was going to say, it's also okay to go back in person if you're comfortable.
Yeah,
if you're comfortable in person and you had a meeting, the performance review, whatever, and you're feeling shit about it all, and then with some people, I'm not very good at thinking on my feet. So I go home, I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, I think about it for 3 hours, stuff meaning in my head. 2 days later, I've got, no, actually, I don't agree with that, and go back then. And it might be in an email, but it's also okay to go back and go, hey, we talked about that the other day, can I just have a word? Now it's not okay, but how about can we make a time? Or, and don't give up. Like, be relentless in the pursuit of an answer. But if you don't get an answer, or the answer is unacceptable, and be okay with moving on. But I would agree, you need to exhaust the opportunity. Not exhaust the opportunities, but feel like you've done everything that you can in terms of trying to figure out whether you haven't got your point across, you haven't asked for what you want. Maybe that you're not prepared to offer it to you. But
sometimes,
sometimes
sometimes I've had colleagues and I'm going, I think it's time to leave.
Yeah.
I think it's time to leave. I think it's time, But I also go, you serve this organisation well. Don't leave until you've got something lined up. You're a good employee. I mean, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know what I mean?
I think the one caveat that I would put on this, and I was in this situation, don't say somewhere that doesn't align with your values.
Yes.
No, okay, sure.
Yeah.
Like it is a little bit like a boiled frog, like company cultures change over time, and you all of a sudden realise that it's not where you were, and at that point, it doesn't matter what opportunities are available, it's never going to work.
That's great. That is the authentic point of view.
Yes.
If it's great in you or you go at the anxiety is eating you.
And I think it takes time. I guess the collective of what we've all said is that it does take time to figure out, but ultimately you will figure it out. And at the end of the day, I think that does come back to gut, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think the other thing, think about all the resources you have now. Like if I think of, think of all the TED Talks you can listen to. Think about all the different mediums you've got now, and podcasts and stuff like that. I just think there's such a richness of knowledge out there to help you explore some of the thinking, some of the feelings. So if you might not get somebody who's really helping you in your corner, do you mean they don't have to be in your organisation. They can be somebody on a podcast somewhere, and you go, oh yeah, okay, out for a walk, I'm reading that, I'm listening to that, I'm just, there's lots of resources now to help you navigate a lot of these things. You know what I mean? If you haven't got that sponsor in your organisation or something like that, then find the sponsor virtually, or think about it differently, or maybe ask ChatGPT or something. You know what I mean? But you know what I mean? And there's things as well. Use the resources around you, not necessarily in the organisation, if you're not getting what you need. That's the thing I'll think about.
Yeah, I was just going to say this has been a really good conversation, and I thank you all for that. But we do have to wrap up. Unfortunately, I'm sure I could certainly keep talking, or we all could for another hour. But I'd first of all like to thank you all for coming, and thank you for your involvement. I'd very much like to thank Mair and Amber and the team at KPMG for hosting us here. We are as a volunteer network, or a network run by volunteers, we are very reliant on the good intentions and help from organisations like KPMG and yourself, Mair. Your relentless pursuit and support of us is very important, so thank you for that. Just a couple of things. So Career Camp we talked about. Corrina has been through Career Camp. Sue runs Career Camp. It starts on the 13th of March. There's 15 spots. I think we'll stretch it to 20. It is an absolutely fantastic thing to do. If you are interested, you can I don't have the details, but I think that on the INZ website, if you search for Career Camp, you should be able to find the landing page that will get everything that you need. You can register. People will get in touch with you. And what else was I going to say? Yes, so do that, that's great. We've also got our Christmas party on the 13th of December. Yay, come along to that, we would love to see you. We're also looking for committee members for the WIN committee for next year, so if you're interested in getting involved in doing some of those things wonderful things that we're doing, we'd love to hear from you. And yeah, thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Can I also just say, connect, this is a good piece of career advice as well, but connect with LinkedIn, right? So Women's Infrastructure Network on LinkedIn, all the Career Camp details will be there. Leaderful on LinkedIn, Sue Watson, Corrina Gibbons-Hurinui, and Mair Brookes, and KPMG, etc. And anyone, and Sharon, of course, and anyone who meets tonight, please connect with them on LinkedIn, because that's the first way of beginning to build a professional network and give you information and feel like you're part of a community, and that will really support your resilience in the industry. So please do that. I will happily accept your request. Someone would say, oh, I'm too shy, I don't want to do it.
So all of those introverts amongst you who are terrified of going up and talking to someone, your challenge for tonight is to link with the four of us on LinkedIn, okay, and say hi.
Yeah,
That'd be great. Right. All right. Thank you very much. Stay healthy. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Do you have a mingle as well?
Yes. Have a chat.